get that cash for the snack bar because you're stopping at the card pool. I'm your host, Stu Galetta.
And I'm Kyle Robertson.
And today we are talking about the top 10 money cards of Future Sight.
This is part 2 of our two-part set review. If you want to take a look back at part 1, be sure to check out our video previously where we talked about the top 10 hidden gems of Future Sight. But without further ado, let's get on with the review.
Let's indeed, Kyle, and let's start off our shiny list of expensive cards with nothing other than the most notorious one in the game, Tarmogoyf. Now, this is a $65 card that is for 2 mana, 1 generic and a green, and it is a bizarre creature type, Lurgoyf. Now, his stats are determined based off its effect. Depending on the number of card types among all graveyards, its power and toughness are equal to that +1. It has a good thing because it comes in early. It can be some sort of little guy for its mana cost, which is really, really good. But also, late game, this can be some sort of extremely powerful card. And especially in Commander, where we have multiplayer formats, there's a lot of different graveyards, and if you go into all the different types of card types that are out there, he can really get out of control really quick.
Yeah, the reason this card is so expensive is because a lot of players would probably consider it the best card in Magic. It is one of the modern format's most efficient threats. In general, probably one of the most efficient threats out there. This could come down as much as an 8-9 on turn 2. Turn 2. But usually it's just going to be maybe a 3-4 or a 5-6 on turn 2 for 2 mana. Still, that is an insane amount of power for very little investment and can be played in pretty much any kind of deck regardless of what the theme is, just because of how powerful it is. And it usually is. In my opinion, it is probably, in terms of raw power, the best Magic card ever printed.
I don't know if I'll give it that title, Kyle, but it is definitely one of the strongest. And one of the things that's really easy to overlook for this card, especially if you're new coming into Magic, this card is sometimes not susceptible to a kill spell. So if you're using something like a lightning bolt, right, where it's doing 3 damage, depending on the number of cards that are in the grave with their types, you play the lightning bolt, it might bump it up to 4 toughness. So the timing of this card can sometimes be essential for its own survival. And I mean, the first time you ever make that mistake, you never forget it for the next time. So beyond Modern, typically you'll find this card in any kind of Commander deck that's using forms of Dredge or a Mill. Typically, Mill is not as seen in green, but more Dredge. There's tons of green Dredge cards out there. There's a variety of commanders out there that can take advantage of it. Sidisi is a great example that this card would really shine in. Green's also really strong at bringing back creatures or any other type of permanent from the graveyard back into your hand or into play. So this is a great card.
I should also note that while the most this can ever be right now is an 8-9 because of the limited amount of card types in the game, if for whatever reason they end up at some point introducing a new card type, this is only going to get more powerful as the game continues to progress, so that's worth noting. And I think even though this is just a straight-up vanilla creature that isn't really that impressive and is susceptible to a lot of different kill spells, the insane power level here for just 2 mana is something you really can't pass up. Well, moving on to something a little bit less confusing now, on number 2 at our list, for $56 a copy, we have a land, Horizon Canopy, and this is a green and white land by virtue of it tapping, and you pay 1 life to get either green or white mana. And additionally, you can pay 1 of any color and tap Horizon Canopy to sacrifice it and draw a card. Very simplistic, like I was saying, but pretty good, and that's reflected in the price tag. It's probably, strictly speaking, better than your standard Pain land, because while the Pain lands can tap for colorless and you pay no life, this one doesn't have that option. You're very rarely using those Pain lands for colorless mana anyway, so you're usually paying for those colors when you want them. Horizon Canopy does exactly the same thing, so in that sense, it's really no difference. But drawing a card off a land is always powerful, even if you have to sacrifice it to do it. It means you don't have to waste slots in your main deck for card draw. In green and white especially, I know you can add other colors to decks like these, but just green and white, you could use all the card drawing you can get, and especially if you need more card drawing late in the game, this is a really fantastic addition. Once again, a modern staple.
I agree with you, Kyle, and actually a huge point to note is that this doesn't come into play tapped. You get all these options on it for just a basic vanilla-like land. This is really powerful for that. And like you said, being able to draw a card is super duper strong. It's really easy to recur lands from the graveyard as well. So like if we're looking at Crucible of Worlds, Titania, or ramming up Excavator. You can make it so that you can go ahead, play this land, pop it, draw a card, and play it again the next turn. So it's really easy to even make it some sort of draw engine. But like you said, Kyle, I would have to agree with you. The draw factor is the huge selling point because green and white have options to draw, but they're not very common. Being able to tutor this out as a land is really strong and makes it so that you can continually do this throughout the whole game. Now, moving on to our number 3 card, we have yet another pricey one, but this one is definitely in a tribal strategy. Our number 3 for $42 is Sliver Legion. It's a legendary sliver and it has a 7/7 body, and it reads all sliver creatures get +1/1 for each other sliver in play. So it's a really simple creature that has the ability to anthem its own slivers, which is really strong. Now, slivers are a very strong creature type. They have a variety of effects that get better as the game progresses. One of them has haste that gives all of them haste. One of them has poison that gives them all poison. So being able to make it so that they get even bigger from having each other out on the field is ridiculous. And I mean, this could be your commander if you really wanted it to.
Yeah, a 5 mana 7/7, even if it is all 5 colors, is pretty good right off. But an easy way to understand this card is that it is Coat of Arms for slivers. It's basically the exact same ability that Coat of Arms has, except it only applies to slivers, and it's on a 5-color creature here as opposed to an artifact. Like you said, Stu, it's legendary, which the advantage is it can be used as a commander, but in my opinion, it's only really good for power, and there's not a whole lot of versatility available here like other legendary slivers we've seen, like Sliver Overlord being the prime example here. Therefore, I wouldn't really use this as a commander for a sliver deck. I would usually pick one of the other ones that gives you a little more utility, but this certainly should be one of the 99 because this kind of almost always one-sided coat of arms effect is just insanely powerful.
Oh, come on, Kyle. You know you would love to see a 5-color changeling deck with this at the helm. That'd be pretty janky right there. No one would suspect it at all, and that would just go under the radar.
That would be pretty cool, and I suppose nothing's really stopping you from just building a 5-color deck full of good stuff with Sliver Legion as a commander. I don't know why you do that, but I guess there's nothing stopping you from doing it. Moving on from 5 colors and back to no colors, aka a land, we're going with number 4 on our list for $34, Grove of the Burn Willows. This is another land that comes into play untapped. You can tap it to give you 1 colorless, or you can tap it to give you either green or red mana, but if you do that, each of your opponents gains 1 life. This is a very odd and interesting land. It actually might be better, strictly speaking, than a pain land, because instead of you paying for mana, you're just giving something back to your opponents, and you may think, well, that sounds terrible, why would I ever want to give something back to my opponents? But I mean, come on. It's only 1 life. It's not really gonna change things, I think. Of course, though, over the course of the game, especially if you play this early, it could end up being a factor. The reason this card is good and considered good in a lot of formats, especially modern, is because it's known for the infamous Punishing Fire combo. Punishing Fire being a burn spell that you could recur whenever your opponents gained life. You can see how that's pretty good with this, and basically, that 2-card combo is all you needed to eventually guarantee that you would beat down your opponent.
But this is also a good card outside of Modern as well. I mean, you could use this in Commander just for the fact of simply fixing mana. And I mean, I personally don't mind giving my opponent something for the fact that I gain something. Forbidden Orchard being a good example of this, where they get a spirit as opposed to life in this case. But also, there are things that can go against this card. Maybe so that the plus isn't as strong. If you were to use cards like Leyline of Punishment, Stigma Lasher, or, Witch Hunt, you can make it so that the life gain is just turned off, and for you it's just a land that's kind of just producing both colors for free. And that is really strong if you can pull off that kind of style.
Or even with other cards like Tainted Remedy, for example, if you could somehow add black into this mix, you could make your opponents start losing life every time you tap this thing, which is pretty cool.
Now rolling right on to our number 5. For $32, this is another infamous card. Pact of Negation. It costs 0 mana for this instant, and it reads, Pact of Negation is blue. Counter target spell. And at the beginning of your upkeep, pay 3 generic and double blue. If you don't, you lose the game. This right here is one of the most famous counter spells in Magic. It is super, super powerful for the fact that it can come out of nowhere and just ruin someone's strategy. Now, typically, this is a card I usually see as a staple in Legacy, just to make it so that people who are comboing off like crazy lose that combo, making it so that you can come through and win. But this is a great card in Commander nonetheless. Being able to just come out from nowhere and make it so that somebody can't beat you or you can stop something huge is a big deal.
Yeah, Force of Will is considered the best counterspell in the game for the virtue that it can be free, and Pact of Negation is almost the same thing. It counters anything for no cost whatsoever, but it does kind of get you with that delayed value. And I would say that really, strictly speaking here, what we have in the sum of all its parts is a 5 mana all catch-all purpose counterspell, which 5 mana for a counterspell is not all that great when you think about it, but the value is that it can be played, as you said, Stu, totally by surprise from a tapped out board, and nobody's going to see it coming. You can stop whatever broken shenanigans the other player is going to do, and you just have to make sure you're able to pay for it next turn. I should note that a really kind of janky way to abuse this card and other cards in the Pact cycle, because there's one in each color that do very similar things to this, is using them with Hive Mind. Now, Hive Mind is an enchantment that basically, whenever any player casts an instant or sorcery, it gets copied for every other player. The way that kind of works with the pacts is, let's say you play something like Pact of Negation with a Hive Mind out. That gives every other player a Pact of Negation too. Sure, they can get to counter something, but every single one of them at the beginning of their next turn is going to have to pay that cost or they lose the game. So if they're not playing blue, or if they somehow otherwise can't swing that cost, they're out of luck, and that can just be an instant win for you. Kind of stupid, but there are decks based around this combo, so watch out for that.
Yeah, most people will look at the you lose the game thing as a huge deterrent, but I mean, with possibilities just to come out and win and surprise like that is a huge thing. But also, like you said, the 5 mana, it's almost like leaving the 5 mana open for a counterspell for the next turn. So it's either now or later you pay. So everyone has their own kind of style, but it is a great card to have, and I mean, it's a great one to also play against your enemies.
Well, I think now we're going to move on from blue to red. Our number 6 on this list at $25 is Magus of the Moon, and it costs 3 mana, 2 generic, and 1 red, and it's a creature, a human wizard. A 2/2, and it simply says, non-basic lands are mountains. You guessed it, this is pretty much the creature version of Blood Moon, but in this case it's a creature, which, as I'm sure you know, Blood Moon is an enchantment. Creatures in general are much more vulnerable to removal than enchantments are, so I would, strictly speaking, say Blood Moon is probably the better card. However, that said, both of them are the same in that they are extremely powerful disruption against any deck that doesn't play a lot of red. I mean, think about how crazy this is. Every single utility non-basic land out there that there is, from your Nykthoses to your Cabal Coffers to your Ghost Quarters to even something like Horizon Canopy or Grove of the Burnwillows, for example, just becomes a mountain. It can only produce red mana. And if you're a deck that doesn't play any red, you're screwed. That's going to be really, really difficult for you to beat. Also, it doesn't help that this card has some incredibly relevant creature types, especially the wizard one, which makes it really easy to search out with things like Vidalcan Aether Mage.
It's a Magus, and for those who don't know the Magus cycle, they are all pretty much Wizards' easy way out to make it so that they can then reprint copies of cards that are real expensive. Like there is Magus of the Moat, Magus of the Coffers, Magus of the Candelabra, and all those cards are decently priced. I mean, Coffers on the lower tail of that spectrum, but Moat and Candelabra are cards that people are willing to give the right arm for. So being able to see that that is a card for Blood Moon is really powerful on that alone. But also I'd like to note that there are other cards out there that can mess with the whole mana type of lands. Contamination, Infernal Darkness, those are both kind of enchantments out there that also can make it so that lands can only produce a certain type. But it's almost like humility for lands. It's really interesting.
You don't see this kind of massive scale disruption in red all that often because red doesn't really do that kind of thing. But when you do, it's really powerful. Blood Moon is a tournament caliber card and continues to be played at top tables all the time. And therefore, Magus of the Moon is also a tournament caliber card that gets played at top tables. pretty much all the time. It's basically having copies 5 through 8 of Blood Moon, and how can you say no to something like that if that's what you're into?
And you shouldn't be into those because they are horrible cards to play against. Usually when they come down, there is a collective groan if you're not running red at all, because you're just like, well, I'm completely out of the game. I have 2 mana rocks and I am in trouble. I can't do anything. So it is a great card to control the field, especially if you're in red. Now moving on to our number 7 for $18.50, we have our first artifact, and it is a legendary one at that. A Cromoz Memorial costs 7 generic mana, and it reads, creatures you control have flying, first strike, vigilance, trample, haste, protection from black, and protection from red. So it is a wall of text that all your creatures now have that just give you great added benefits.
Yes, this pretty much makes all of your creatures mini Akroma Angel of Rats, because this basically just transfers all the abilities that the original Akroma had onto itself and all of your creatures. It makes all your creatures really difficult to stop in combat, from evasion to making them able to attack and block, and even giving them protection. You don't really see that much of the protection ability anymore because it applies to so many different things that Wizards has realized how absurdly powerful it is and really refrains from printing it all that much. Especially in this case, giving all your creatures protection from black and red, that means that makes them unblockable sometimes against the right decks and immune all of the time to most of the good removal that is out there. I don't see this card played too much at tournament level, but this is a very popular card with the casual crowd, and is an absolute game breaker once you slam it down on the field.
Definitely, especially if you're running a token strategy where like something like Rise the Redeemed has gone and populated its army to a huge number. You go and slap this on the field, you should be swinging for game. This is usually the one card I'm always between is this and Eldrazi Monument. The fact that the one makes them all indestructible, where the other one has a little bit more on the effects and it doesn't have the sacrifice clause, they're both really high cards for that what it can do, because it just has a huge impact on the game as soon as it comes out for your field. And I'm always in between which one's better. So let us know down in the comments below which one is the one that you typically would run in your decks.
Moving on to our next card, number 8 on the list, we're going back to the Pact cycle with Summoner's Pact. Again, this is a green instant that costs 0. Summoner's Pact is green, as it clarifies in the text. You search your library for a green creature card, reveal it, and put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. And at the beginning of your next upkeep, you have to pay 4 mana, 2 colorless, and double green, and if you don't, you lose the game. Once again, this is a free spell, and in this case, instead of being a free counter spell, this is a free tutor for any green creature, which is pretty solid. I mean, if you think about paying, as we discussed with Pact of Negation, what's basically 4 mana to search any green creature from your deck to your hand, that's a pretty good rate. Tutors are pretty solid. I do kind of resent the fact that you can only get green creatures with this, but whatever. The fact is, though, that most of the time I would rather play a better sorcery speed tutor like Primal Command or Green Sun Zenith, because I just think they give you a lot more bang for your buck when it comes to your mana, while basically doing very similar things. In the case of Green Sun Zenith, I would argue doing better things. However, the instant speed here does add value, so you can do this very suddenly, so your opponent doesn't have time to react to what's coming out next. And finally, the last point I'd like to make is, once again, with Hive Mind, this can potentially win you the game via stupid, dumb combos. And unlike Pact of Negation, where anybody can get a use out of countering a spell, not everybody can get use out of tutoring for a green creature. So maybe that's worth noting too.
All good points, Kyle, but the only thing that I'll actually like to add about this is that it puts the creature to your hand. Now, typically, most of the green tutor spells that we see are typically going to the top of the deck, but it's not going directly to your hand. Like, you're going to have to obligate a draw turn in order to get that creature. So being able to get it directly to the hand so you can go ahead and cast it when you need it is a big deal, and it is a great thing. Now, granted, it has to be a green creature, is slightly limiting, but if you're already running green, you're already going to be having some sort of big, stupid green creatures in there, and it shouldn't really hinder you too much. Now, moving on to a card that any deck can enjoy. Our number 9 slot for the price of $13 is Coalition Relic. It costs 3 generic and is an artifact. It has 2 tap effects. The first being add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. The second being, put a charge counter on Coalition Relic. Lastly, at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, remove all charge counters from Coalition Relic. Add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool for each counter removed this way. So this is a very unique kind of card. It's very similar to something like a Darksteel Ingot. 3 mana for a card that can go ahead and make it so that you get any color of mana on your turn whenever you need. But the really cool thing about this is that it has a storage kind of system to it. You can go ahead, tap, put a counter on it, and get the mana for next turn. So this way you can go ahead and get 2 for next turn as opposed to just 1. Now the following turn you will just only be able to get 1 or none depending if you got to put a counter on it. But it gives you the variety to spend your mana in a different way. So you can go ahead and try to get the extra bump when you need it. Turn 3, you can go ahead, put a storage counter on it. Especially if you're running a turn 5 commander, it means turn 4 you can get it out. If you haven't missed a land drop, you're just going on par. It just gives you a little bit of a next jump with your mana, and that is a very big thing.
In my opinion, this is actually probably the best 3 mana rock artifact out there, second only to Chromatic Lantern, because Lantern just gives you such a variety of options with your mana. Coalition Relic is the second best because, as you mentioned, Stu, it can potentially give you 2 mana of any color in the same turn rather than just 1. You do kind of have to jump through hoops to do it, but still, the possibility is there, and really, pretty much every player should be running this instead of like a Commander Sphere or a Darksteel Ingot or something like that, but not everyone has access to this card because it's rare and it's pricey. This has a lot of value in that, like I said, it can make mana of any color, and the speed at which it happens means the first thing in my mind, of course, to abuse this would be proliferate, but you kind of have to jump through a few hoops in order to proliferate with this thing. You'd have to pretty much forego making any mana for a turn in order to proliferate counters on this. So it is possible, but not necessarily easy. However, like a lot of other cards, this is broken with doubling season, so keep that in mind. Well, rounding out our list at number 10 for, ironically enough, $10, we have another land. This time it's an interesting one, Dryad Arbor. This is not just a land, but it's a land creature, and it is both a forest, a land type, and a dryad, a creature type. As it indicates in the reminder text, this means Dryad Arbor is not a spell, it is affected by summoning sickness, and can tap to give you 1 green mana. And in addition, it adds Dryad Arbor is green. It's also a 1/1 creature. There's a lot of things to keep in mind when you're considering Dryad Arbor. As the reminder text says, it is not a spell, but it is a land. So you can only play 1 land per turn. The fact that this is a creature does not change that fact. It will be your land drop for turn. Also, it is affected by summoning sickness. Most lands, including basic lands, can tap the second they're put out on the field. This card cannot. So there are some drawbacks for using this instead of just your everyday basic forest. The fact that it is a creature, though, makes for some really interesting sort of things. I should also add that being a creature does kind of make it more vulnerable to removal, but the real value here is that it is searchable and tutorable by a lot of different things that wouldn't normally be able to take advantage of something like this. I'm automatically thinking of something like Wood Elves, where you play it and you can get a forest from your deck into play. Wood Elves, for example, could put this, a creature and a 1/1 at that, right into play. Having another creature to chump block with potentially is not bad, and you get another land into the bargain. Also, this used to be really, really popular in Modern. It still is to some extent, but it was a heck of a lot more broken when you could Green Sun Zenith this for 0 back before Green Sun Zenith was banned. And so you would basically just pay 1 mana to get this land creature out, and that was an amazing first turn play.
Well, there's actually another way that you could typically abuse this. I actually have done it myself. Turn 1, play a land, do the Soul Ring drop, make everyone groan, but also tap it, play Aether Vial, and then tap Aether Vial for a 0, bring Dryad Arbor into play. That's just extra bang on bang on bang right there. But also, like you said, Kyle, this is a really good card in a variety of ways for both being a creature and a land. So being able to search it out with a variety of different ways, like Expedition Map, Sylvan Scrying, Crop Rotation is really valuable. But also, like we said, with any other kind of creature tutor, if you need to do a Summoner's Pact to get this, you can. If you got to do any kind of form of like recursion from the graveyard, like Dredge has ways to bring it back. You have Living Death, which can possibly bring it back from the graveyard into the field. You can even do like Titania to recur it and everything else like that. So it is is very unusual in its versatility, both in the deck, on the field, and in the grave. It's such a unique card. It takes a little work around the first time you use it, but it is a card that you definitely can call your friend. So now that concludes Future Set. We've seen the money cards and we've seen the hidden gems. So now it comes time to rank the set. Kyle, will you tell us how we do that?
Yes, of course, Stu. We determine the rank based off of the hidden gems we found, the mechanics and themes of the set, how impactful it was on Magic as a whole, and based off of these factors, we personally award the set the status of bronze, silver, gold, or at the very top, platinum. So, Stu, why don't you start us off and tell us what you think here?
This set is a platinum, and by no mere margin. This is a phenomenal set. And I love it for the fact that it does something that you kind of see with the unhinged sets. In fact, that it's breaking the boundaries of Magic. It's trying to make it so there's a whole new style of play. Now, unlike unhinged sets, these are legal. You can totally play with these whenever you want. And it makes it so that colors who typically can't do certain things or need some sort of new spice get it. And from that, we can see the rewards as a player, and it's really, really strong. The mechanics alone are something that just strike me as something totally unusual in this set. We see Suspend, but we also see other effects that just haven't ever been reprinted ever. Like on my number 1 pick, Flesh Writher, where else do we see Transfigure? It's the only card in the game that has this effect, and it is a very strong effect. Being able to tutor like this is unheard of, and especially in black, to recur it. But also we see it with the money cards. If you look at how the price jump is, it's from 65 to 10 bucks. That leaves a lot of meat on the bone. So if you were to go ahead and open up a pack of this, you could find value in anything, any color, any kind of type of variety. And it's not only by like a certain type. Like we see lands like Horizon Canopy, which can do something that are just never like on another card. But we also see creatures who can get around certain things. Centaur Omen Reader is a card that I really love just for how unique it is, because it can do something that you don't see in green. Green loves to ramp, but now it's getting around its cost with reduction. That's unheard of. And so if you go ahead and you slap this on the field, no one's going to really know what it does. Do I want to counter this? I don't know what you're really going to do with this. Okay, it's going to save you mana, but is there something else with this? Like you're just going to attack. And only you will know that true value because this is such an obscure card. And this whole set has stuff like that. And I absolutely love this set. It is a platinum, platinum, platinum.
Well, I'm going to have to agree with you, Stu. I briefly toyed with the idea of giving this set a gold, but in the sum of its parts, you really can't do anything else but give it a platinum. Kind of like what you were saying, the whole point of this set in terms of themes and mechanics was to really push the envelope of what was possible, go really outside the box with the thinking, and design things that were totally new and unheard of before, and also, as the name of the set suggests, give possible hints at the future direction of Magic. And to be fair, we have seen a number of mechanics that were introduced in Future Sight, then gone back to in later sets, and revisited, done sometimes a little bit differently, but basically the same, and this was kind of where it all came from Future Sight. Now, looking at the individual cards here, I mean, take a look at the money cards. There's only a couple of these, actually, that I think are money cards just because they have limited printing and are popular with the casual crowd. We see Tarmogoyf, Horizon Canopy, Grove of the Burn Willows, Pact of Negation, Dryad Arbor, Magus of the Moon. That's at least half the money card list right there are all staples of competitive Magic to this very day. Tarmogoyf alone changed the entire dynamic of competitive Magic because people had to figure out ways to deal with such a powerful creature that could go in pretty much any deck and was adapted to fit into any deck on turn 2. That demands very, very efficient answers, and while we do have them, Tarmogoyf was kind of what started it all. Looking at my hidden gems even, we have Aven Mind Sensor, another staple in competitive Magic, and we have cards that push the envelope, like Yixalid Jailer. We have Venser, Shaper Savant, kind of a really weirdo sort of wizard card. And speaking of wizards, Vidalcan Aether Mage, which is one instance of an ability we haven't seen come up quite yet, but I'm hopeful that type cycling will become something in the near future. Overall, Stu, I really have to give this set a platinum rating for many, many different reasons, and I could go on about it for a while, but Future Sight was exactly what the name suggested. It was a peek into the future, and it brought the future to Magic. The future is still here now, it's still looking as good as ever, and these cards are still awesome.
But that is going to conclude our pool time for today. And if you liked what we were playing with, be sure to check out our previous segments to see more about what we're talking about with these hidden gems we found in this set.
And if you use any of these money cards anywhere in your decks, feel free to let us know. Which ones do you like? Which ones do you use? Do you have the same thoughts as us about them? Maybe something different. Of course, you can always give your comments down below this video, or you can hit us up on Twitter at MTGTheCardPool, or even email us at mtgthecardpool@gmail.com. I'm Kyle Robertson.
And I'm Stu Galetta, and we will see you next time at the Card Pool.